Well, guys, I'm doing it. I'm making a tutorial video. I wasn't planning on doing one because there are a lot of tutorial videos out there about 3D printing, about how to slice your files and put supports in there and get them printed and all of that. And that's true. That's true. That's how I learned how to do it. But one thing that there isn't a whole lot of out there is videos that show specifically how to arrange and how to create supports for all of the parts of articulated figures, the arms and the legs and the whatever. And considering that's what I sell, I get a lot of questions from people. Hey, how do you recommend what's the best way to arrange figures on the build plate? How do you do supports to where you're not going to see a lot of evidence that there were supports, all of that stuff. So here we go. I'm going to do a tutorial video and I'm just going to show you guys how I do it. Everybody's going to be a little different and everybody's going to use a different slicer. I use lychee slicers. Some people are going to use Cura or Chitu Box or any of the others that like come with your printers. You're going to use different types of resin. You're going to have different conditions in your workshop, humidity, temperature, all of that. It all plays a role in your printer settings. So I'm going to show what works for me that and this is just for standard resin. It's not if I'm printing, something super rubbery. This is just for printing articulated vintage style figures in some version of a standard UV resin. Okay. So without further ado, here's a look at how I set things up. Enjoy. See, I have the lychee slicer program open. I have the Pro version, and I've selected resin as opposed to filament, since that's the type of print that we'll be doing. Since this video is focused on basically showing how to arrange and how to rotate articulated figure parts, arms, legs, heads, and so on, that's what I'm going to focus on here. I'm going to pull in a basic Kenner Star Wars action figure, basically the exact file set that you would get if you were to download this figure from me on Cults 3D. You would get a folder with a lot of this stuff in it, and so I'm going to select all of the parts, all of the individual STL files that I want to have in there, including the head peg, and I'm going to load them in. I feel like this should be happening faster. Thanks, slow computer. That's what I get for having a zillion apps open at the same time. Okay, so this is how it all comes in. And if you are using a different slicer, Cura or one of the others, it'll be the same, roughly the same concepts here. Just some of the functions will be different, so just bear with me here. But this should be enough for you to figure out how best to do it on yours. So I've selected all of the parts here, and I just on platform. They're already on platform, so that's good. And then I'm going to go over here to the arrange function, and I'm just going to separate them out here. Now, again, everything I'm doing here is just how I do things. That's my best workflow for articulated figures. You might find that other things work better for you. Okay, so I'm going to rotate. And the key here is some people print things like pegs vertically like this. I print them more at an angle like this. The key is to expose as little area to the bottom axis that needs supporting so that you minimize the number of holes and other artifacts that you have from the supports once you print and remove the supports. That might sound a little vague, but you'll see what I mean. So basically, with each of the parts, I'm going to rotate them like maybe like 30 degrees, maybe 25 degrees, something like that. I'm going to do this one at like, I don't know, 25 because there's some curvature there. And then all the supports are going to be mostly concentrated in his crotch area and under here, meaning that you won't see them when the figure is assembled, and that's what's most important. Now, arms are a little trickier because there's not really an area that isn't exposed. Even the underside here, you're going to see it in an articulated figure. So I use gravity and physics to my advantage here as best I can to minimize the supports needed, and I try to concentrate them like on the top of the arm in the back and on the back of the arm itself. So you'll see here in a minute once we start placing the supports what I'm talking about. Now with the head, I'm just going to tilt it. He's got a helmet there that complicates things a little bit, but I'm going to tilt it about like that. Again, concentrating most of the supports on the underside where you won't see them. I'm going to tilt that just a little bit more. Okay. Now with legs, some people I've seen, I usually do them like this because I want the pegs. I'm sorry, not the pegs. I want the supports on the bottom of the foot because it's easier to just sand off any leftover remnants of supports off the bottom of a foot than the top. Now, orienting it like this, orienting it like this means that most of the supports are going to be on the bottom of the foot and the back of the ankle area here. You'll see in just a second. Now, some people, the ones who do it upside down, basically, will rotate it like this, and then that minimizes the supports on the bottom of the. You don't have any supports on the bottom of the feet, which means the figure will stand up straight without any sanding as long as you have a file with flat feet. But it also means that you are going to have you're going to have some holes or remnants here from the supports if you're not careful. I don't mind that, but the thing that gets me is when you're doing like humanoid legs and you've got the foot, oftentimes you have to. It's kind of impossible to orient the piece to where you don't have to have a bunch of supports on the back of the leg and simultaneously on the top of the foot. And if you can do that with some of these, great. If not, I would rather have the remnants of the supports be on the bottom of the feet than on the top. So you know what? For illustration purposes here, I'm going to do one leg each way, and you'll see the difference. And you can choose what works best for you. Okay, so now that we've got them all roughly laid out like this, I'm going to go into the prepare area, and I'm going to go ahead and raise everything. Whoops, I didn't select anything. Whoop, there we go. I'm going to go over here and to utilities, and I'm going to raise everything up off the bed by 5 millimeters just to give those supports a bit of breathing room. Okay, so now you'll see here, and I'm sure in other slicers it's similar, all of the areas that are highlighted with this yellow are the areas that are going to need supports. And so again, I'm going to have to, I always tweak these a little bit after I get going, but this is an example where I can have this leg upside down like this, and I can put supports here where they'll be hidden, here where they will be hidden, and I may only have to put a couple of supports up here on the feet, and I bet that I can rotate this piece a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to do that this way. So, okay, good deal. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to select all of these again. I'm going to prepare. And yeah, everything else looks pretty decent here. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to rotate this a little bit more. I can do better there. Yeah, that looks better. Minimize those supports however I can. And I'm going to rotate this one a little bit more too. See how good I can do. Yeah, that's all right. Again, this is going to be rough. Because I'm doing it in real time here, and I don't want to take forever in a day. Let's see. So it might not be perfect, but we'll give it our best shot. Okay, so while everything's kind of oriented as well as it can be at this point, I use, and you can see my settings here.
again, this is not the gospel. This is just the way I oftentimes do it. I have presets for light and medium supports. And for figures like this, I really don't use anything other than light supports with this small tip so that it really doesn't leave much evidence behind that there were supports there when I'm done, which is obviously what we're shooting for here. If there's a piece that's heavier, or there are some weird areas that jut out in strange ways, I'll use some of those medium supports just to give it a little bit extra strength. So yeah, I am going to hit the bottom here, and I know some of you are going to be like, oh, he's using too many supports, and others of you are going to be like, oh, he's not using anywhere near enough supports. Don't forget to put one in the foothole. But hey, everybody does it a little different. And so even though there's no area back here that's highlighted in yellow indicating the need for supports, I do place a few because I find that if I do this, just like this, yeah, that's probably it. It just greatly reduces the likelihood that I'll have a failed print. I also pop some in there under the pegs just to hold those up because I don't want those not printing correctly. That looks a little weak. I'll give it another one there. Okay, and that's it for the leg. That's it for the leg. Now let's do this other one that's upside down. There, I'm going to do the same concept. And again, these are light supports. I see some people, instead of using, 5 or 6 light supports, so they'll use like, 3 larger ones. And that's great. You can totally do that. I find that I would rather have more supports and less evidence that the supports were ever even there than to have 3 supports that leave behind larger holes. I'm also going to pop a few little supports in here because of the angle of this peg. I don't want anything printing funny there. Might pop one on here too because, again, remember, nobody's going to see this. Now here, I'm going to go boom, boom, just for the heck of it, and then I am going to reinforce this overhang just enough. And you'll see back here on the back of the foot, there's a little area. Again, this is not an exact science, but it's best to give it every little bit of help that it can get. And now this, again, I don't normally print legs this way, but I'm just going to pop a couple of supports in there. We'll see how this goes. Okay, that's it for the legs. Now we're going to go over here to the arms, and it's a similar affair. Just going to kind of cover this area. Got to hit that peg. I can't wait to hear the comments on this video because, this is one of those things where everybody has their own way of doing things. My way of doing things has changed 100 times since I got into this, and everybody else's has too. And there are a lot of people who are like, who will be like, I never thought of doing it that way. And then there's other people who will be like, you're an absolute idiot for doing it that way. But, we're all learning here, man. And like I said in the intro, when I was learning how to do this, there were tons of videos on YouTube about how to orient miniatures for 3D printing. But it was always Warhammer stuff or whatever, and never articulated figure parts like this. So I had to kind of piece together the way that I do things by occasionally seeing a screenshot of somebody else's support setup, and also mostly just experimenting and figuring it out. All right, let's hit this peg here. And some people, again, I said, some people orient pegs and little things like this totally different. They'll do it vertically and barely use any supports. That's fine. I've done it that way. But with my print settings, the way that I have them, I find that doing it this way dramatically increases the chances I'll have a successful print with those little teeny tiny parts. So that's how I do it. And now we're in the torso crotch area here, and this is the heaviest piece of all of the parts, and so I go a little bit more heavy on this in these areas. But that should do it. And then I'll cover this overhang just a little bit, and then it's important to drop a couple of little pegs or little supports inside the peg hole so that it doesn't collapse. I used to always forget to do that, and I'd end up with these wonky peg holes. And then just like before, I'll pop a couple of supports back there just to give it a little extra help. Do that. occasionally I'll do one here and here also. I think I'm going to do that just because Darth Vader has has a longer torso than a lot of the other old figures. Okay, I don't like that support right there. That doesn't look strong enough for me, so I'm going to delete that. Okay, pop a couple in there, and maybe one right there just to make me feel better. I feel like I'm Bob Ross painting a picture here. We've got some happy little supports here. Okay. And the head here is the last piece. Again, don't forget to cover inside the peg hole. And right on the edge, like basically these are the first parts. This is the first section that's going to get printed of this part, is that first touch there. So it's really important to always have good support along there so that you don't end up with, if I didn't do that, you'd end up with a helmet that had a flat edge here on the back. I'm going to do this and maybe 2 here. Okay, now that I've got all this done, all the parts are done, all the parts are selected, I'm going to go over here to Manual, and I'm going to click Parent, and it's going to consolidate a lot of those supports so that I use less resin while maintaining the strength. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to go to bracings, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to connect a lot of these supports with bracings. And now I just take a look, and I see, is there anything weird here? You can see, I mean, this is minimal support through most of this, with the exception of the butt here. But it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. And then once I've done that, then I go back to the layout section, and I just arrange them. Now, a lot of people would print it just like this. I've seen people do that. And you totally can. There's no reason not to, except for if you're running printers like I do, where I need to have all of my printers running basically all the time with with maximum output, basically. Then I will create, and I suggest you do this too, I will create slicer files for each of the figures that I have, and I'll get them as close together as possible without touching. I find that you get good extra support if you let the bases overlap here, which is always helpful. And, again, this is not an exact science, but you just kind of line them all up. And then I'll save this as a slicer file. And then whenever I want to print a Darth Vader, I just open up the Darth Vader slicer file, and I can combine it with, I can scoot everything over here, and then I can load up another figure and put it right here. I can load up another one and split it up and put it down here, and I can print, depending on the figures and the size, I can print somewhere between 3 and 5 figures on each build plate. This is my Anycubic Photon Mono 4K, so it's not a huge build plate, but it works. It works. Okay, so that's that, and then if I wanted to export this, then I would go into the export section, and I've selected my resin here. I'm not using any anti-aliasing on this. I'm just going to keep it straightforward. And I'm going to create a PWMA file to send to the printer. Now, people have asked me for my printer settings, so I'm going to go ahead and show those right now too. This is for standard gray resin. And here we go. I'm just going to leave it up here for just a second. Feel free to pause the video. Now, this is the part of the tutorial where I heavily caveat everything and say everyone's prints are going to be different. Your printer, your resin, your atmospheric conditions, everything is going to have a bearing on your print settings. So if it's hotter, if it's colder, more humid, less humid, if you're using cheap resin, expensive resin, if you're using a custom recipe, if you're using tough resin, if you're using like a tenacious resin, or you're just using standard resin, flexi resin, whatever. All of that is going to come into play here. So I really suggest that you not try to just copy my settings, and do some experimenting, and also look at the manufacturer's recommendations for your printer and your resin combo. They pretty much all of them offer that on their website, so that's handy. And also you should note that I'm using a modified version of what some people call the Vroom settings, like VROOM settings, and that basically just means fast. And I've tweaked this over time to where I am printing as fast as I can on this machine while maintaining structural integrity and getting good quality detailed prints. Your mileage may vary on that. Some people have great success with faster prints. Some people do not. Cure time, lift and retract speed time, all of that is a factor. So just like any other set of settings that you would see online, treat my settings here as just a place to start, something to try, and don't come yell at me if this fails for you, because it works great for me, and everybody's stuff is different. Okay, so I have that selected, and then I'm just going to export. And once I've exported, I'm just going to call this Darth Vader tutorial. Okie dokie. And then that's that. So I'm going to speed run through this in the video, and we're just going to skip straight to the part when I pull it off the, or actually, you know what? I'll show when I put it onto the printer and get it going, and then I'll show when I pull it off the printer. And there you have it.
All right, here we go. Printer's all ready to rock. See you in a little while. Okay, here we go. Time to get it out. Let's see how we're looking here. I'm not used to doing this with only one hand. Pull it off the plate, off the thing. Yep, there we go. All the parts. Looking good. I'm gonna scrape them off now. Okay, so I have printed and cured the parts, and here's what we ended up with. Everything is pretty smooth, and this is definitely the leg where the supports were connected to the top. And as you can see, I don't see really any evidence that there were supports there. And the foot is completely flat. The other leg, there's a little bit of bumpiness. I hope you can see it. Yeah, you can see a little bit of evidence of the supports there, but it's still pretty flat. Not as flat as the other one. And of course, there's no evidence here either. So this figure is an example where it's actually probably better to print the leg off the build plate upside down like that, because there's not really any evidence of the supports. It looks great. And then we look at the body. Pretty smooth here. Yep. Evidence of supports a little bit on the bottom. You can see them there, but you'd never see that when the figure's all put together. All right, that's just dust. Whoops. Yeah, that's about it. Looking good. I'm gonna put this guy together. All right, all put together. Looking good. That is a Kenner Darth Vader. So did that help? I hope it did. I hope it all made sense. And if you have any further questions or anything, hit me up in the comments, or shoot me a message or something. And until next time, stay funky.